I'd like to call this hearing to order. I'd like to welcome our witnesses, Jim Clapper, Director of National Intelligence, John Brennan, Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Jim Comey, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Admiral Mike Rogers, Director of the National Security Agency. Directors Clapper and Brennan, while I've said this to you before in closed session, this is likely your last appearance before the committee, at least in your current roles. And I want to thank each of you before you get out of here for your many years of dedicated service, both in uniform and out of uniform, Jim. John, in many different capacities, you have served your country in an unbelievable way, both of you. And we want you to know how grateful we are to you and how grateful the nation is to you for the service that you've provided. We convene today to discuss the President's directed review of Russian activities and intentions in recent U.S. elections. While Russia and the Soviet Union have used active measures as tools of statecraft since the 1920s, recent actions by the Russian government represent, as you reported, a notable escalation. I know that the public disclosure of these activities surprised many, and the notion that another state would attempt to interfere in our elections is quite troubling. However, Russian active measures, as a general topic, is not new to the members of this committee. We've held more than 10 hearings and briefings over the last 2 years that have focused in whole or in part to better understand the scale and scope of these efforts and the intentions behind them. Each of our witnesses has appeared before us in closed session to discuss this topic, and in response, on a bipartisan and bicameral basis, this committee and its sister committee and the other body have put forward unclassified and classified proposals to address these activities. Some work has been done, but to effectively address this challenge to the integrity of our system of government will require a whole-of-government approach. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on the details of the intelligence community assessment. Intelligence reporting over the last few years, to include the classified and compartmented portions of this assessment, gives me no reason to doubt the findings contained within the product. That said, we owe it to our colleagues and the American people to do an independent and bipartisan review of the report and its conclusions. I've therefore instructed committee staff to carry out an assessment of the sourcing behind this report, and we will be asking each of our witnesses to provide the committee access to the intelligence that contributed to this assessment. I want to assure my colleagues on this committee and in this body that we will follow the intelligence wherever it leads, and we will conduct this review in a nonpartisan manner. I also want to assure the witnesses before us today, as has long been our practice, the committee will treat the protection of these sources with the level of security and professionalism required. I'd also like to quickly thank the men and women of the intelligence community for their work in completing this review. To each of our witnesses, please thank your respective staffs. I have no doubt that the President's directive, Jim, to you and to others, ruined many's holiday plans. While this moment in our history is critical, and the testimony before this committee in an open setting will, I hope, help the American people understand what Russia attempted to accomplish as part of its focus on our 2016 elections. I want to make this clear. Our democracy is not at risk. We can rest assured in the strength of the United States of America and have continued faith in the electoral process. We must be alert, though, to the challenges that face us and the threats posed by those who seek to undermine Western democratic values, whether they're through interference in our elections or relentless propaganda and active measures targeting our friends and our allies abroad. Our values are indeed under assault. The key differences between the efforts of the past and the attacks of today, however, is the tools being used to carry these out. Gentlemen, thank you again for being here today. I look forward to your testimony, General Clapper, and to the opportunity to query questions to the rest. I will now turn to the distinguished Vice Chairman, the Senator from Virginia.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to echo, first of all, your comments in terms of commending all of the witnesses, but particularly Director Clapper and Director Brennan for your great service to our country. I also want to acknowledge one of the new members of our committee, both new members here, Senator Manchin and Senator Harris. I know Senator Cornyn will be joining us briefly. And while she's not here yet, I want to acknowledge the great role that Senator Feinstein has played both as chair and vice chair on this committee. We're here today to discuss the intelligence community's comprehensive review into Russian interference in our 2016 presidential election. For me, one of the most serious events of my public life. Interference in American democracy and our electoral process by any outside power is unacceptable. Now, much of the press reporting and conversation about Russian activities have focused on the hacks of the DNC and John Podesta. But as the report pointed out, the Russians also hacked systems associated with the Republicans. They just chose not to release that material yet. There's nothing that prevents them from doing so at a time of their choosing in the future. While the target of this campaign was Secretary Clinton, any of us, Democrats or Republicans, including members of this body, could easily be the next target. What the Russians did was nothing less than an attack on our political system and democracy itself. We can simply not allow it to stand. The IC assessment is more detailed, but is in line with previous assessments from the intelligence community, that Russian officials at the highest level, including President Putin, engaged in, your words, not mine, in an unprecedented level of interference in our election. It concludes that these actions had the goal of harming the candidacy of Hillary Clinton and the boosting the candidacy of President-elect Donald Trump. We are not here to relitigate the results of the election. At the same time, I am committed to ensuring that there is a thorough, bipartisan, and expeditious congressional investigation of Russia's role. In my view, our committee should focus on three broad areas: the Russian hacking and release of stolen information, Russia's use of state-owned media and other means to amplify real and fake news to further their goal, and contact between Russian government and its agents and associates of any campaign and candidate. I, like you, Mr. Chairman, have written to all the witnesses here today, asking them to cooperate with us in this investigation and turn over as many documents and as much evidence as quickly as possible. I, like you, am reiterating that call today. It is equally important that the incoming administration and those folks who will take Director Clapper and Director Brennan's roles going forward will continue to cooperate in this effort. Additionally, it's my hope, while we've made a first step, that we'll continue to try to declassify as much material as possible, while again protecting sources and methods. The American people deserve to know, as soon as possible, that their elected representatives have taken a close look at the intelligence report that we're considering today. They deserve to know whether we concur or not with its conclusions, and that we're prepared to respond to the threats outlined in the assessment. The actions that the President took recently in response to the Russian activities was an appropriate and first step. At the same time, I still have questions why the Obama administration didn't act further and didn't act sooner. But as we look forward, preventing future attempts to undermine our democracy and our position in the world will require sustained response from the incoming administration and from this Congress. I truly believe the strength of Americans' democracy will be measured in part on what actions we take to develop a robust and proactive cyber strategy. Part of that strategy must include tools and capabilities to deter and effectively respond to future attempts by foreign actors to influence America's democratic process. One of the things I've always valued about service on this Intelligence Committee is the tradition of leaving partisanship at the door, oftentimes when we go into that skiff. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and all our members to complete this investigation as quickly and expeditiously as possible. And gentlemen, your agencies, the work that your agencies completed underscores the importance of the role the nation's intelligence community plays and the men and women who quietly work every day to keep our country safe. This report represents the best analysis of the men and women of the intelligence community. These are professionals who have taken an oath of office to present the whole truth as they see it, faithfully to Republicans and Democratic administrations alike. As a member of this committee, and I think all of us who served for some time, have seen firsthand the dedication of the men and women who work for you. I know that one of the most primary missions of the intelligence professionals is to render the best professional judgment, regardless of political considerations, and always be willing to speak truth to power. I support them for their work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. 4 members. Once Director Clapper has been recognized and completes his testimony, it is the intention of the chair to recognize members based upon seniority for 5-minute questions. There is a vote that's scheduled right now for 2:30. It's the intent of the chair to complete our questions in open session by the conclusion of that vote, and it is the intent of the chairman to then move to a closed session, which would start after the 2:30 vote. If there's need to adjust that, we'll make an adjustment on the way. Having said that, a reminder to all members that we're in open session and that you should take that into account from a standpoint of the questions that you ask, and realize that there are unclassified and classified reports. And with that, Director Clapper, the floor is yours.